During Hollywood's early years, horror was treated like a side hustle. Cheap thrills, bottom-tier entertainment, a genre the purists tolerated, but never respected. Studios saw it as disposable, a quick way to fill a double feature, a carnival attraction dressed up as cinema. But somewhere in the mid to late 60s, something flipped. Horror didn't just survive, it became the most profitable genre in Hollywood. The only lane where a $5 million idea can turn into a $500 million phenomenon. This is the story of how the genre everyone underestimated became the one thing keeping Hollywood alive. Horror didn't even become a fully recognized category until the release of Dracula in 1931, which immediately birthed the Universal monster era. The 30s and 40s gave us icons: Dracula, Frankenstein, the Wolfman. But by the 1950s, the genre became whack. Studios pumped out overly colorful, unrealistic rubber suit monsters, radioactive ants, flying saucers on strings. Horror existed, but it wasn't respected. Critics dismissed it, studios minimized it, audiences treated it like junk food. But then, the 60s arrived, and horror evolved. The mid to late 60s is when horror stopped being dismissed and started being treated as serious cinema. In 1968, with the premiere of Night of the Living Dead, George Romero changed everything. No more cheesy rubber monsters, just raw, bleak realism. It wasn't just a zombie movie. It was a mirror to American anxieties about violence, racism, and the societal collapse. Critics couldn't ignore it. Audiences couldn't shake it. This is the moment horror began reflecting collective fears, and the industry realized fear could be art. Then, in 1973, there came along a horror film that changed the game forever: The Exorcist. The film that cemented horror as a cultural force. It was first horror film nominated for Best Picture. At its release, there were lines around the block and news reports of fainting and vomiting at the cinemas. It wasn't just a movie, it was an event. The 1970s became horror's renaissance. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, 1974, Jaws, 1975, Halloween, 1978, Alien, 1979. These films blended artistry, psychology, and cultural relevance. Horror was no longer a sideshow, it was cinema. As the genre continued to grow in Hollywood, the overwhelming feeling of the genre being a double-edged sword became more prevalent. Because studios exist to bring order to chaos. They control the theaters, the actors, the marketing, everything involved in making or watching a film. But horror was the opposite. It was the one genre they couldn't control. With each new horror project, a studio has to bet on new talent and venture into uncharted territory. Because with horror, success was never tied to celebrity branding or massive budgets. It only needs fear to become a viral sensation. And fear is cheap. Long before YouTube and TikTok, horror filmmakers were already doing what content creators do today: micro-budget productions with direct-to-audience marketing and word-of-mouth virality. A horror picture also had the first viral marketing campaign in film history. In 1999, a film made on a shoestring budget of just $60,000 would go on to earn more than $250 million at the global box office. A film that didn't rely on stars or spectacle, but on something far more powerful: curiosity, weaponized. The Blair Witch Project didn't simply release in theaters, it slipped into the culture like a rumor. The filmmakers constructed an entire folklore from nothing: a witch that never existed, a town with secrets it never had, and a history so meticulously fabricated it felt older than the woods themselves. Then they blurred the line between myth and reality. Missing person posters appeared in real towns. Early internet forums erupted with speculation. And on a primitive website, years before social media, fans discovered evidence: forged police reports, doctored news clippings, journal entries, timelines, all designed to make the disappearance feel disturbingly real. People weren't just watching a movie, they were investigating a mystery. And in doing so, the Blair Witch Project became the first true viral marketing phenomenon in film history. A global event powered not by advertising, but by doubt. It proved something terrifying to studios. You don't need Hollywood to make a hit. You just need a good myth. And that's horror's superpower. You don't need a six-figure camera, a massive crew, or an IMAX screen. Horror thrives on imagination, not infrastructure. As most genres scale upward with the marvelization of the film industry, bigger budgets, bigger stars, bigger marketing. Horror scales downward. Smaller budgets, smaller casts, smaller marketing, bigger margins. Comedy doesn't travel, drama gets lost in culture, action needs spectacle, but fear is universal. A scream in Tokyo carries the same meaning in Paris. A dark hallway in Brazil feels no different than a dark hallway in Dubai. Fear translates everywhere. And that's the secret of horror. It doesn't need a dozen versions of a trailer tailored to different markets. Horror doesn't need global press tours, choreographed interviews, or expensive campaigns built around star chemistry. Horror speaks a universal language. And because of that, it almost never follows Hollywood's 50 to 100% of the production budget marketing rule. In the world of blockbusters, studios routinely spend tens of millions just to announce themselves. Some, like Avengers Endgame, pushed marketing budgets toward $200 million. But horror, even at the blockbuster level, it rarely crosses 10 million. Look at the numbers. The original Saw, a film that would redefine modern horror, cost just $1.2 million to make. You might try to be cute and say that's because Saw came out over 20 years ago. We're in a different market now. Well, all right, you little non-believer. Tell me why. Smile, one of 2022's biggest horror hits, carried a production budget of $17 million. Now compare that to the same year's Thor: Love and Thunder, a $250 million production. And while Disney keeps its advertising budgets a secret, industry analysts estimate the marketing alone hovered around $150 million. That's the divide. Blockbusters spend fortunes trying to earn your attention. Horror earns it with a shadow, a sound, a feeling you can't quite shake. Because fear doesn't need translation, it only needs an audience willing to look into the dark. And once we entered into the era of social media, the wildfire that is horror became weaponized. Because in horror, the genre markets itself. The community isn't just loyal, it's cult-like. And the threshold for what counts as good is brutally simple. Prestige doesn't matter, budgets don't matter. If a film can make an audience feel fear, a shiver, a gasp, a moment where the room goes still, that's enough. Horror fans flock to it instinctively. A powerful performance, a breathtaking setting, or a well-thought-out storyline are all background characters to the genre. The main character will always be fear itself, which is a large reason as to the reason you rarely see big marketing rollouts for horror. Social media does most of the heavy lifting, reaction videos, screams, theater freakouts, TikTok challenges. In the film Paranormal Activity, the studio literally filmed the audience's frightened reactions in test screenings, which they later used in the very trailers used to promote the movie. The movie turned into a must-see cultural dare. Lines wrapped around the block on opening weekend. Horror thrives on controversy. Banned posters, too scary for theaters. Reports of the audience fainting. When The Exorcist was accused of being evil, it became a cultural event. No other genre turns outrage into revenue like horror, because horror rewrote every rule. In this world, the concept is the celebrity. The idea is the face on the poster. A doll possessed by a demon. Annabelle. A family hunted by silence. A quiet place. These aren't actors. They're weapons. Interchangeable, ageless, impossible to negotiate with, and the genius of horror is that its icons aren't tied to a single human face. Freddy, Jason, Pennywise, their eternal IP, characters owned, controlled, and reborn by the very studios that created them. Not stars, assets. IP that can never demand $20 million salaries, which is why you will almost never see a horror picture production in the 9 figures. Big names and shiny VFX are all an unnecessary expense for the genre. Freddy, Jason, Pennywise. Horror created low-cost cinematic universes long before Marvel. And that's why horror is the only genre where failure is profitable. In most genres, a flop is a funeral. Careers stall, executives panic, and studios start pointing fingers. But in horror, a flop is just a rounding error. Take Paranormal Activity. It was shot for $15,000, the price of a used Honda. Paramount picked it up for $350,000, still less than what some blockbusters spend on catering, even if the movie crashed at the box office. And theaters were empty across the country, the studio would have walked away in the green. Instead, that tiny DIY nightmare detonated into $193 million. A film that cost less than a car made more money than entire superhero franchises. Horror is the only genre where the floor is low, but the ceiling is infinite. When every other genre became too expensive, too risky, too dependent on stars and global markets, horror stayed simple. A dark room, a camera, and fear. Horror became the most profitable genre not because it changed, but because Hollywood did. And when the dust settles, the blockbusters fade, and the stars lose their shine, fear will still be here, because fear is the oldest story humans shared. And Hollywood learned, fear is the only thing that always sells.